A strange scene unfolds in Caracas. President Nicolas Maduro faces a television camera and begins to sing. He chooses John Lennon's Imagine.
Peace, peace, peace.
The song, he explains, is a message for Washington. His country wants peace. Meanwhile, across the Caribbean Sea, a different message is being sent. The waters churn with American warships. The message is not one of peace, but of power. A formidable display of military might, billed as necessary in a long fight. Far from the presidential palace, the U.S. Navy assembles its largest force in the region since the Cold War. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, leads a full carrier strike group, accompanying destroyers, accompanying cruisers, accompanying combat aircraft. These ships sail within striking distance of the Venezuelan coast. They crossed into U.S. Southcom on November 11th. The Ford entered the Caribbean on November 16th. The Ford's arrival marks the heaviest U.S. naval concentration in the Caribbean since the Cold War. Official reason: combat drug trafficking. The United States government frames its actions in the Caribbean as a direct response to a national crisis. For years, the country has been ravaged by an opioid epidemic, with fentanyl responsible for a staggering number of overdose deaths. The White House says stopping the flow of these narcotics is a top national security priority. Officials point to transnational criminal organizations, sometimes with alleged state support. They say these groups are exploiting maritime routes to poison American communities. The military deployment, they contend, is a necessary, robust measure to interdict shipments at their source and dismantle the networks responsible. The administration highlights a broader strategy of using lethal force against suspected traffickers. Current actions under the Trump administration have focused on lethal force against suspected transporters abroad. Most notably, what officials say were the killings of at least 83 civilians in Caribbean strikes. This posture is presented as a tough, no-nonsense approach to protect American lives. The narrative is simple. Drugs are coming from the South, and the U.S. military will stop them. The focus on Venezuela rests on long-standing allegations that high-ranking Maduro officials are complicit in the drug trade. When we look at the data from the U.S. government's own agencies, the narrative begins to fray. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the Department of State have published extensive reports on drug trafficking patterns, and their findings do not align with a primary focus on Venezuela. Take fentanyl, the drug at the heart of the current overdose crisis. A March 2025 State Department report explicitly identifies Mexico as the only significant source of illicit fentanyl and fentanyl analogs reaching the United States. The Department of State, in consultation with the Drug Enforcement Administration and other relevant agencies, has identified Mexico, especially its northwest, 3,000 miles from Venezuela, as the only significant source of illicit fentanyl and fentanyl analogs significantly affecting the United States during the preceding calendar year. The story is similar for cocaine. While Venezuela is often cited as a transit country, it is not a primary producer. The vast majority of cocaine is produced in Colombia and, to a lesser extent, Peru and Bolivia. According to a 2024 DEA fact sheet, an estimated 90% of the cocaine that reaches the United States is produced in Colombia and is trafficked primarily through Mexico and Central America. Most fentanyl in the U.S. comes from Mexico, and most cocaine comes from Colombia. This established route, mainly the Pacific Corridor and the U.S. southwest border, is thousands of miles away from the current naval concentration in the Caribbean. A 2017 DEA report concluded that less than 10% of U.S.-bound cocaine passes through Venezuela. While any amount is serious, the figure suggests Venezuela is a minor player in the U.S. supply chain. The sheer scale of the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean is what fuels the most intense skepticism. Experts point out that an aircraft carrier strike group is a tool of power projection, designed to fight and win major wars against nation-states, not to chase small, fast-moving drug boats. The ship's arrival marks the largest U.S. military presence in the region since the invasion of Panama in 1989. The deployment includes assets like F-35 fighter jets, advanced radar systems, and guided missile destroyers. These are instruments of overwhelming force, seemingly ill-suited for the nuanced and intelligence-driven work of drug interdiction, which is typically handled by the Coast Guard and smaller naval craft. Analysts argue that the operation's posture, the concentration of forces, the high-profile deployment, and aggressive rhetoric suggests a broader strategy than just narcotics enforcement. While the Trump administration frames it as a crackdown on narcotics, analysts say the scale and posture suggest a broader strategy aimed at destabilizing President Nicolas Maduro's regime. It is seen by many as a form of coercive diplomacy, using the threat of military action to achieve political goals without necessarily firing a shot. The message is not just for Maduro, but also for his international allies, Russia, China, and Iran. Is a fleet built for major warfare the right tool to stop small drug boats? The military buildup did not occur in a vacuum. It is set against a backdrop of escalating political tensions between Washington and Caracas. The timing is critical. In July 2024, Venezuela held a presidential election that was widely disputed. President Maduro claimed victory. The United States rejected the results. Many Western and Latin American nations also rejected them. They cited a lack of transparency and said there was evidence opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez had actually won. The U.S. imposed targeted sanctions in response. Sanctions hit Venezuelan judicial officials and National Electoral Council members. Washington accused them of helping Maduro certify his victory. This confrontation created a charged atmosphere. Many see the military deployment as Washington refusing to accept the election outcome. Venezuela responded, not passively. Maduro deepened ties with adversaries. He held joint military exercises with Russia. He strengthened economic alliances. He strengthened political alliances. Washington viewed these moves as provocative. The result, a classic security dilemma, defensive moves seen as offensive. Beyond the strategic calculations of Washington and Caracas, the military escalation carries a very real human cost. For the people of Venezuela, already in a deep economic and humanitarian crisis, the threat of conflict adds another layer of fear and instability. Decades of economic mismanagement and the weight of sanctions have led to hyperinflation, collapsing public services, widespread shortages of food and medicine. The specter of a military confrontation threatens to worsen an already desperate situation, disrupting trade, fishing, daily life. The aggressive U.S. military posture has also caused deep unease across Latin America and the Caribbean. Regional leaders, wary of a return to the era of U.S. interventionism, have voiced their concerns. Gustavo Petro warned an attack on Venezuela would be seen as an attack on the entire region, then later moderated his position and called for accountability for the U.S. strikes in the Caribbean. Colombia convened an emergency CELAC meeting that expressed deep concern over foreign intervention in the region. With so much military hardware and so many troops operating in close proximity, the potential for an accidental clash is significant. The ongoing strikes against alleged drug vessels, resulting in civilian casualties, highlight the thin line between law enforcement and open hostilities. The situation in the Caribbean is complex, layered with competing narratives and conflicting evidence. Is this really a war on drugs, or the first step in a new game of geopolitical chess? For more breaking news updates and in-depth analysis, stay tuned to PulsePointNews. Many respond with skepticism. Seasoned analysts see a mismatch between force and target. Is this truly about drugs, or a power play aimed at a long-opposed government? About 15,000 American troops are at sea and on land in the region. Venezuela sees this as a direct threat. Caracas mobilizes hundreds of thousands, soldiers, militia members on high alert. The Caribbean's tranquil waters and vibrant cultures now stage a tense standoff. This piece will examine the facts behind the official narrative and whether the war on drugs masks a larger geopolitical objective. Washington accuses an alleged network, the Cartel de los Soles, within the Venezuelan armed forces of cocaine trafficking. These claims are not new. For years, the U.S. has accused Venezuelan government and military members of forming a drug trafficking network. Experts highlight the militarization of the Caribbean has little real impact on the flow of narcotics to the U.S. Venezuela is a transit zone, not a primary producer or a global trafficking hub. Analysts argue it's not about drugs, it's about regime pressure. Documents suggest long-term planning for a heightened U.S. presence in the Caribbean, potentially through 2028. A single miscalculation, a stray shot, or a misunderstanding could spiral into direct conflict. While Maduro sings Imagine, the Caribbean witnesses one of its most tense military buildups in years. The U.S. says they are fighting drugs. Experts say it's a show of power. For more breaking news updates and in-depth analysis, stay tuned to PulsePointNews, where global events meet true understanding. Support our work and subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Thanks you for your attention.